choose is all about communication processes. Next po. Communication is a complex process and it is difficult to determine where or with whom a communication
Ina,
encounter starts and ends. This communication process is the guide toward realizing effective communication. It is through the communication process that the sharing of a common meaning between the sender and the receiver takes place. Individuals that follows the
there are
communication
three.
process will have the... Wait lang po, di pa ako tapos.
Sorry.
Sorry. Individuals that follows the communication process will have the opportunity to become more productive in every aspects of their profession. Effective communication leads to understanding. There are also two other factors in the process, and those two factors are present in the form of the sender and the receiver. The communication process begins with the sender and ends with the receiver. Okay po, next. That's all. Thank you.
There are three models of communication processes. First is transmission model, second is interaction model, and third is transaction model. I will discuss the transmission model. Transmission model in here communication is actually presented as linear. It is very one-way communication, and this model actually is a very simple, where the sender encodes the message and the message goes through the channel, which can be written channel or spoken channel, and then it's begin to decode by the receiver. Encoding and decoding means it is the process involved in communication that let us understand what is happening with the message. Encoding is the process of translating thoughts into communication. Decoding is the process of translating a communication into thoughts. Noise represent the communication barriers. That's all.
We will jump on interaction model. As you can see on our power, it is a cyclical process of communication for the reason that there are channels for feedbacking, which communication more interactive. It's a two-way process of communication that allows the sender and the receiver to send feedback through their own channel safely within physical and psychological context. Like on the slide, as you can see, cycle of communication itself is being shown, and in this model focuses on more about interaction. Also, the sender here could also be the receiver, and the receiver could also be the sender. The physical context here in our presentation includes the environmental factor in communication, and the psychological context include the mental and emotional factor in communication. That's all. Next.
So now let's talk about transaction model. Transaction model of communication is the process of continuous change and transformation where every component is changing, such as people, their environment, and the medium used. It describes communication as a process in which communicators generate social realities within social, relational, and cultural contexts. The roles of the sender and receiver in this model differ significantly from those in the other models. Instead of labeling participants as sender and receivers, the people in communication encounter are referred to as communicators. So dito daw po sa model na to, imbis na sender or receiver ang tawag sa mga taong involved or sa mga participants, gaya ng sa transition model, dito tinatawag sila as communicators. There are many factors directly or indirectly affecting the communication process in transaction model. This can be environmental noise or communication barriers. So, sa environmental noises po, it can be physical, physiological, or psychological noise. Cultural, social, and relational contexts are the most overpowering elements of communication in transaction model, while physical and psychological context has considerable effect on communication, enhancing or undermining it. Let's first discuss the social context. When we say social context, this refers to the norms, values, laws, and other restrictions of a society to communicate with a specific limit. It also includes rules that bind people's ability to communicate. Some of the examples are greeting people when meeting, yung nagpapasalamat, and apologizing. This model also adds that it's not just social reality that help people in communication process, but communication also shapes self and social reality in return. It also says that communication is not only for exchanging messages, but also to create and establish relationship, helping people in the formation of community. Cultural and relational context will be discussed by Ivy Vicino.
Next is the relational context. Relational context includes the previous interpersonal history and types of relationship we have we have with the person. We communicate differently with someone we just met versus someone we've known for a long time. Initial interactions with people tend to become more highly scripted and governed by established norms and rules. But when we have an established relational context, we may be able to bend or break social norms and rules more easily. For example, you would likely follow social norms of politeness and attentiveness and might spend the whole day cleaning the house for the first time you invite your new neighbors to visit. Once the neighbors are in your house, you will also make them the center of your attention during their visit. And if you end up becoming friends with your neighbors and establishing a relational context, you might not think as much about having everything cleaned and prepared or even giving them your full attention during later visits. Next, another part of transmission model is the cultural context. Cultural context cultural context includes various aspects of identities such as race, gender, nationality, ethnicity, sexual orientation, class, and ability. It is important for us to understand what whether we are aware of it or not. We all have multiple cultural identities that influence our communication. Some people, especially those with identities that have been historically marginalized, are regularly aware of how their cultural identities influence their communication and influence how others communicate with them. That's all. Now, we will proceed in the guide questions. Next po.
Naka-next slide na.
Okay po, thank you. So the first question in the guidelines is, what are the basic principles presented? First, One of the basic communication principles that you will see in our vlog is first, communication is integrated into all parts of our lives. Because communication is part of our daily lives and we always use it, like when talking to someone and making interaction to them. This kind of action is called communication. That's why communication is integrated. The real world is whatever we are experiencing at any given moment. In order to explore how communication is integrated into all parts of our lives, it is divided into four spheres: the academic, professional, personal, and civic. That's all. Thank you. Next po.
Guidelines B. What is the particular function of communication is applied in your blog? The function of communication that is being up in our blog or in our advocacy blog is the rhetorical tradition because our advocacy is under cause support wherein we are trying to support or establish something like advocacy blog. We are trying to bring children into another chapter of their life by first teaching them on learning how to read and write. That's why it's the rhetorical tradition. That's all. Next po.
Letter C. What ethical consideration of communication that must be applied in your blog making? The ethical consideration of communication that must be applied in our blog making is being responsible thinking because we should be responsible on choosing the topic that we will teach to the students. And also we should be responsible on making decisions when it comes to the things that will help us to make our blog more impactful. And also when we make a blog we should develop our connection or relationship to our target audience so that we will be comfortable with each other while we were making our blog. And it helps us to avoid awkwardness between each other. That's all. Ah,
Addition in guideline A is communication neatness is also present in our vlog, as we give learnings and knowledge needed by our target audience, which are the primary students. With our vlog, the students can be helped in terms of learning and achieve physical needs, especially in keeping their mind functioning. Third is communication is process. In communication models, the participants are the senders and or receivers of message in communication encounter. The message is the verbal or nonverbal context being conveyed from sender to receiver. In our vlog, we use transmission model as part of communication process because it describes communication as a one-way linear process in which a sender encodes a message and transmits it through channel to a receiver who decodes it. Like what we do in our vlog, we share some knowledge and advocacy about the areas of reading to help others or primary students to develop their skills and understanding.
That's all. Thank you po.
that's all for our discussion for today. Thank you.
Thank you po.
Thank you.
Malib na. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.